In the year 2000, Aardman Animations, known mainly for their short film and TV work like Wallace and Gromit and Shaun the Sheep, took a big and very successful step forward with their first ever feature film, Chicken Run. Just about everything that people love about this company transitioned beautifully into the longer runtime. A creative plot, seamlessly mixing clever humor, sentimentality, and surprisingly dark elements when it needs to, while also including some great art direction and animation.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've been a wonderful audience.
It was a critical hit, and being made with the assistance of DreamWorks, it financially surpassed everything they made just on their own at the time. Admittedly, that lasted less than a year, but still.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me.
I could go on about this movie and how great it is, but I think its reputation kind of speaks for itself. There is, however, one other film that doesn't have as much of a reputation, but I think it's finally worth talking about. 23 years after the release of Chicken Run and 8 feature films later from Aardman, they teamed up with Netflix to give us a sequel, Chicken Run: Dawn of the Nugget. It was made by a different director and mostly different writing team, but did retain a good chunk of the original voice cast. There were a few recasts made, to be fair, the most noteworthy of which would be the loss of Mel Gibson as Rocky. Fair enough, I suppose. Who did they replace him with? Oh god, that's not better. Still, the movie came out, and was it a success? Well, yes, but actually no. It received fairly good reviews, although not nearly to the extent of the original, and the film seems to have essentially just come and gone since then. I wonder why. Well, for one thing, the opening scene didn't exactly inspire confidence.
I'm gonna tell you a story. It's all about the time we escaped from a chicken farm.
The film opens with a recap of the first movie, but instead of doing it in a unique or stylized way, the film resorts to just playing clips from the previous film that anybody with a Netflix subscription and Premiere Pro could have thrown together. Once that's out of the way, the film transitions to the modern day, with all the chickens now living peacefully in the Shire, apparently, and Ginger and Rocky becoming parents to their new baby chick, Molly. And it's here where we see the first indication that something is off this time around. To show you what I mean, let's compare it with the opening scene from the original. Instead of the dark, tense, but still really funny introduction, we get a much lighter scene of Ginger and Rocky frantically trying to keep Molly safe as she grows up. I can see what they're going for here, making the opening scene this time around be a bit more upbeat to show how much the lives of these characters have improved since the first movie, but I just don't feel like it's done all that well. The slapstick we see here honestly feels pretty weightless, with all the mishaps the characters get into being pretty inconsequential. Like, the baby's crib rolls down the hill and crashes, but she's perfectly fine, so who cares? Not to mention that while they brought the ever-talented Harry Gregson Williams back from the first movie, in this opening scene, his eerie but determined and hopeful musical score gets substituted by a pop song, which I personally just found a little grating.
Let me tell you all about my baby. You will never find her misbehaving.
The plot this time around focuses on the chickens discovering Funland Farms, a new chicken farm run by Mrs. Tweedy that seems harmless and welcoming for the chickens, but inside holds a dark secret. Molly gets taken to the farm, and Ginger and the other chickens have to rescue her.
Last time we broke out of a chicken farm. Well, this time, we're breaking in.
This setting isn't as interesting as the original film either, which is a shame because the original was very clever in how it was designed. What made Mrs. Tweedy's farm work in the original is that, while for the most part it looked like a regular chicken farm, the movie also includes just enough details to make it look like a prison camp with barbed wire fences and guard dogs. It's something that the film never draws explicit attention to, but it's a subtle way of parodying other prison escape movies by setting it in something as mundane as a normal chicken farm, while also making you genuinely sympathize with the characters who are trapped there.
No chicken escapes from Tweedy's farm!
Dawn of the Nugget, on the other hand, goes to a bit more of an extreme. The farm that the characters are trying to escape this time is a high-security fortress, similar to what you'd expect from a Bond villain. To the movie's credit, I do kind of like the implied character development from Mrs. Tweedy, who in the first movie didn't consider the chickens much of a threat.
It's chickens, you dolt! They don't plot, they don't scheme, and they are not organised!
But after underestimating them before and ultimately being outsmarted, this time around she's going all out with the security. That part I can appreciate, but what ultimately kills it for me is that this setting just isn't very interesting. Instead of the unique setting from the original that thematically works on a number of layers, this is just a generic evil lair with not a lot to make it stand out, and the art direction consists mostly of bland grey hallways. Another problem that stems from this is that this level of absurdism is present all throughout the movie, to the point where, watching these two films back to back, it barely even feels like the same franchise. Yes, the original was somewhat absurd as well, but what made it work was that there was also a certain level of realism to it. Like, obviously a pie machine would not look like this mechanical death trap on the inside, and obviously chickens can't build a fully functioning plane, but these are things that could exist in some form in the real world. Ironically, the somewhat grounded tone makes the absurd elements all the weirder, because you can almost but not quite see the logic behind it. Here though, Mrs. Tweedy's master plan has gone from using a pie machine on the chickens to using mind control collars to brainwash the chickens and make them into nuggets. The dark tone is still there, and I could see this working in something like Wallace and Gromit, which has been a science fiction franchise since the beginning, but am I the only one who thinks the idea of a mind control collar in a sequel to Chicken Run just feels incredibly out of place? All of this is stuff that I could potentially look past if there was at the very least a good story behind it, but unfortunately there's not a lot going for the movie on that front either. The main conflict between the characters revolves around Ginger and Molly. Ginger in the original film was an extremely determined character, fighting back against the odds every step of the way to escape the chicken farm and make a better life for herself and her friends. Now that she's succeeded though, we see her trying to keep that peace she's worked so hard to get, even to the point of losing perspective of why she worked for it to begin with. When presented with the notion that there's another chicken farm nearby, instead of wanting to save the chickens like she did before, her new priority is to keep her friends and especially her daughter safe.
We have to hide.
Hide?
Molly, on the other hand, is just as adventurous as her mother used to be, wanting to see the world and being tired of the borders that she was born into, that her freedom-fighting mother put her in.
You can't make me stay here. You're not the boss of me.
Actually, I am.
As a sequel to Chicken Run, this isn't bad. It could make for a good source of conflict between Ginger and Molly if we saw them argue over it throughout the film. Ginger can speak from experience that there are a ton of dangers in the outside world, and being too overzealous about exploring it can be a very bad thing, while Molly can point out how stifling their home life is for her, and insisting that Ginger be the fearless and heroic chicken that she used to be. But their disagreement never gets any worse than some mild arguing in the first act, and they spend most of the movie separated, so there's not a lot of opportunities for them to explore each other's mindsets. This also isn't helped by the fact that the pacing is just not good and somehow manages to be both too fast and too slow. Throughout the majority of the runtime, the characters are focused pretty much exclusively on this rescue mission. There's a lot of running around, dangers to avoid, planning and strategizing, taking out a whole ass human with only 3 chickens, which, if they could do that this whole time, why didn't they do that in the original film? But not a lot of the slower, quieter moments to properly develop the characters like the original film often did. But at the same time, the pacing still feels too slow because for all the running around these characters are doing, very little actually happens over the course of the plot. The movie is trying to give us a slow burn in revealing what this farm is up to, capturing and brainwashing all these chickens, but is that really necessary? The movie is called Dawn of the Nugget. I kind of figured it out from context. The original was very direct and to the point in regard to establishing the threat. The movie opens with the escape attempt from Ginger. Okay, I suppose if I lived there, I'd want to escape too. I'm with you so far. Then we see what eventually happens to these chickens when they're no longer considered useful. And immediately, you're invested in seeing these characters escape. Quick, dark, and very effective. In this movie though, we don't actually see a chicken be killed until almost an hour into the movie, roughly 2/3 into the runtime. So when the main threat of the story is barely a tangible threat throughout, and the two characters who are supposed to learn a lesson are almost never together and almost never have a moment to catch their breath, what exactly am I left with? Well, not a lot as far as I'm concerned. The movie as a whole isn't horrible, and as a sequel, it doesn't devalue or insult the original or anything like that. It's just a mediocre at best follow-up to a really strong first attempt at a feature film. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters Heather Reed, Zelda, Moon Goddesses, The Hen Rolled, Chris Spicer, Jacob K, Wasp Sen, Andrew Taylor, Deceiver of Gods, and Antifa Count Duckula. Thank you so much for the support. If you'd like to see your name in the credits, along with early access to scripts and videos, as well as exclusive unused video thumbnails, or if you'd just like to chat with me, consider supporting me on Patreon for just $1.50 a month. The link is in the description.